Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tajitik Mena, current chairperson of the SPS committee. Welcome, everybody, to the SPS committee thematic workshop on transparency. This activity kickstarts the SPS committee week, where the global community of the SPS world comes together here in Geneva. Thank you all for joining this discussion. I am very, very happy to see so many familiar faces today. Before we begin, let me remind everyone that this workshop will be conducted in hybrid format. For those participating virtually via Zoom, please press the raise hand button to request the floor. Remember to only activate your microphones once you have been given the floor, and please mute your microphone once you have finished speaking. Additionally, I want to highlight that interpretation is available in English, French, and Spanish. Instructions on how to select your preferred language on Zoom have been posted in the chat. Furthermore, a recording of this workshop will be made available in English, French, and Spanish on the WTO website shortly after the event. Now, turning to the substance of our discussions. You may recall that at its November 2023 meeting, the SPS committee decided to hold a thematic workshop on transparency. The SPS committee usually holds workshops on transparency provisions of the SPS agreement every 2 or 3 years. This March 2024 workshop builds on the June 2022 SPS workshop on transparency, which provided an introduction to the main functions of the EPING SPS and TVT platform, launched in July 2022. The final program for this workshop was circulated in document GSPS Gen 2192 Rev 2 on 13 March 2024. Let me also acknowledge that the WTO Secretariat was able to fund the participation of 27 officials and 5 speakers from WTO technical assistance beneficiaries in this workshop. This morning, they have already participated in 2 engaging group work sessions tailored for national notification authorities, NNAs, and inquiry points, NEPs. These sessions offered comprehensive training and interactive exercises focusing on SPS transparency provisions aimed at enhancing the technical knowledge and operational capacity of SPS, NNAs, and NEPs. Over the next day and a half, we have a dynamic agenda planned as follows. In session 1, the Secretariat will present a brief overview of SPS transparency obligations and recommendations, relevant work in the SPS committee, and online transparency tools. Session 2 will delve into discussions regarding notifications of SPS and TVT measures, along with ongoing transparency-related initiatives within the TVT committee. Tomorrow, we will proceed with the remaining 3 sessions in addition to an EPING clinic. Session 3 will explore the interface between transparency and monitoring the implementation of international standards, including insights into the work of the 3 international standard setting bodies observatories. Then, in session 4, members will be invited to discuss the procedures for submitting SPS notifications to the WTO, including through the EPING, SPS, and TVT platform. In session 5, members will share their experiences regarding coordination at the national level and or with other members, also highlighting their utilization of the EPING, SPS, and TVT platform. Finally, I will conclude with a few closing remarks. In addition to these sessions, the Secretariat will provide training for SPS, NNAs, and NEPs as part of an EPING clinic to explain the various levels of access to the EPING, SPS, and TVT platform, such as the functionalities available to admin users. This EPING clinic will take place tomorrow in room W, this one, in person only, from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Let us commence now with session 1, focusing on transparency in the SPS agreement and relevant online tools. In the first half of this session, the Secretariat will provide a short presentation of SPS transparency obligations and recommendations, discuss the progress made since the fifth review of the SPS agreement, and share some facts and figures on members' implementation of SPS transparency provisions. In the second half of the session, the Secretariat will provide an overview of relevant online transparency tools. This first presentation will be delivered jointly by Mr. Rolando Alcalá and Ms. Nasia Mohamed, both from the SPS section in the WTO Secretariat. Rolando and Nasia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry. And in French, bon après-midi à vous tous et bienvenue.
Welcome.
Mentioned in the first half of our presentation with Nasia, we will provide a brief overview of transparency provisions, as well as work undertaken since the fifth review of the SPS agreement. So let us begin. Transparency is a core principle of the WTO. It is present horizontally across all WTO legal texts and is a key pillar in the implementation of the SPS agreement also. So why is transparency important? Well, transparency matters because changes in regulatory requirements may affect market access. Transparency also enhances clarity and predictability, thereby facilitating trade and reducing costs. This in turn helps to keep the business environment stable and predictable and allows businesses to have a clear view of opportunities. Transparency also facilitates advance warnings, giving businesses more time to adapt to change in regulations. And transparency also helps to improve the accountability and responsiveness of the regulatory system by giving governments and businesses the opportunity to seek information, consult, and comment on new or changed regulations. So, of course, as you can see on this slide, transparency is one of the key provisions of the SPS agreement. So, of course, there are other, these are like all the key provisions, the main provisions of the SPS agreement. We will be focusing on transparency today. So transparency is embodied in Article 7 and Annex B of the SPS agreement. So members, according to Article 7, members shall notify changes in the sanitary, phytosanitary measures and shall provide information on their SPS measures in accordance with the provisions of Annex B. And so the text of Article 7 makes reference to Annex B, which contains provisions on notification procedures, inquiry points, publication of regulations, as well as general reservations. So now, in addition to assist members fulfill the transparency obligations under Article 7 and Annex B to the SPS agreement, the committee has developed recommended procedures. And this document contains recommendations related to the work of notification authorities, inquiry points, recommended notification procedures and notification formats, the publication of regulations, etc. So the latest revision of these recommendations were circulated last year, actually, in January 2023. And this was a technical revision, which included changes to reflect updates linked to the new e-ping SPS platform. The previous revision, Rev 4, was also a technical revision at that time to update outdated information related to the online tools. We had modernized the old systems and also on the notification formats. There were some changes. And in fact, the last substantive changes were made in GSPS 7-3, adopted in December 2008, when the notification formats were modified to include checkboxes for countries and regions affected and a checkbox for the 60-day comment period. And new information was added on conformity to relevant international standards and entry into force 6 months from publication. So I will now pass it over to Nasia. She will dive now on these transparency provisions.
Thank you, Rolando. On the slide, you see a summary of the 4 main transparency obligations in the SPS agreement. First is the obligation to notify draft regulations and allow reasonable time to receive comments, discuss these comments upon request, and take them into account. Second is the obligation to publish regulations and allow a reasonable interval between publication and entry into force. Then, members must ensure that an inquiry point exists which is responsible for providing answers to all reasonable questions and relevant documents. And finally, members also have the obligation to designate a national notification authority responsible for the implementation of notification requirements. Now, we will take a closer look at these provisions one by one, starting with the notification of draft regulations. In the SPS agreement, if a member is planning to develop a new regulation or to change a current one, and there is no international standard or the content of the draft regulation is not substantially the same as the international standard, and the regulation may have a significant effect on the trade of other members, members have the obligation to notify. In addition, in accordance with the recommended transparency procedures, even when the content of the draft regulation is substantially the same as the international standards, members should notify. In terms of timing, members must notify the draft text of regulations at an early stage when amendments can still be introduced and comments taken into account. For regular notifications, as mentioned, members must allow reasonable time for other members to make comments in writing. They must discuss these comments upon request and take the comments and the results of the discussions into account. And following the recommended transparency procedures, this comment period should last at least 60 days. Now, where there are urgent problems of health protections, members need to notify immediately. And here, no comment period is required. However, members still need to allow other members to make comments in writing, discuss these upon request, and take them into account. Here, you can see the template of the regular notification format. This version has been used since 2008. So just to highlight some of the information that you can find on the notification format, you can see the language the notified document is available in, conformity with international standards as indicated by the notifying member, proposed dates of adoption and publication, if the measure is trade facilitating, and the final date for comments, and more. Along with the notification format, members should, whenever possible, provide a hyperlink or electronic version of the proposed regulation. Also, members need to provide a copy of the proposed regulation if requested, and this is in accordance with Annex B of the agreement. If it is not the NNA or NEP supplying this document, then the member needs to indicate in the notification format the address and contact information of the body responsible for providing these copies. Under the SPS agreement, developed country members shall, if requested by other members, for example, to their inquiry point, provide copies of their regulation or summaries of their regulation in English, French, or Spanish. All members are encouraged to share unofficial translations with each other using the supplement format. Alternatively, members can also share unofficial translations of a document relating to a notification through the International Forum of the ePing SPS and TBT platform. If after the notification is submitted, and this could be for both regular and emergency, members would like to provide additional information or changes, this can be done using the following formats. An addendum can be used, for example, if the comment period was extended, or if there is a change in the scope of products covered, or change in the status of the regulation, etc. There is also the corrigendum, which can be used to correct an error in a notification, for example, an incorrect address detail. And also, as mentioned previously, any member can submit a supplement to share unofficial translations of a document relating to a notification. Finally, members can also submit a revision to replace the existing notification. For example, if a notified draft regulation was substantially redrafted, or if a notification contained a large number of errors. The first three formats on your screen, the addendum, the corrigendum, and the supplement, must be read in conjunction with the original notification. Other notifications that can be submitted to the WTO are notifications of determination of the recognition of equivalence of SPS measures. This is in accordance with the Decision on Equivalence, GSPS 19 Rev 2. Members can also submit notifications on whether and how S&D treatment may be provided, and this is in accordance with the procedure to enhance transparency of S&D treatment in favor of developing country members. And according to the guidelines to further the practical implementation of Article 6 of the SPS agreement, members are encouraged to inform the committee when a request for recognition of pest or disease-free or area of low pest or disease prevalence is made, or a determination on whether to recognize such areas is made. Specific notification formats are available for notifications of equivalence and S&D treatment. And before moving to the next slide, let me also note that we will not delve into notifications to the TBT committee in this presentation, as this will be discussed in further detail in the next session. Moving now to how to notify. So the most efficient way to submit notifications is through the ePing SPS and TBT platform. There, the notification formats are available and can be completed online. And we will come back to this in the second half of the presentation and in tomorrow's ePing clinic for those of you who are interested. Members can also submit notifications by email to the Central Registry of Notifications, or the CRN. The notification templates can be found on the WTO website. And just to add here that in accordance with Annex B of the SPS agreement, notifications must be submitted to the Secretariat in English, French, or Spanish. Let us now look at the publication of regulations, which is a fundamental component of transparency under the SPS agreement and a general obligation for members. In accordance with Annex B of the SPS agreement, members must ensure that adopted SPS regulations are promptly published, and except in urgent circumstances, they must allow a reasonable interval between the publication of the measure and its entry into force. This in order to allow time for producers in exporting members, and particularly in developing country members, to adapt their products and methods of production to the requirements of the importing member. In accordance with the Doha Ministerial Decision of 2001, this reasonable interval should be a minimum of 6 months, except if the regulation is considered to be trade facilitating, then members should not delay the entry into force of the regulation. So to summarize, let's now take a look at the timeline of SPS notifications. First, when a member decides to regulate, it must publish a notice at an early stage in such a manner as to enable interested members to become acquainted with the proposal to introduce a particular regulation. Then, the member must notify to the WTO the draft regulation at an early stage. It must allow reasonable time to receive comments, discuss such comments on request, and take the comments and discussions into account. A period of at least 60 days should be allowed for comments in accordance with the recommended transparency procedures. Then, once the regulation is adopted, it must be promptly published, and members need to allow a reasonable interval between the publication of the regulation and its entry into force, unless this is a trade facilitating measure. And this period, this reasonable interval, is at least 6 months in accordance with the Doha Ministerial Decision of 2001. So I will now hand over to Orlando, who will take you through the next two obligations in relation to the National Inquiry Point and Notification Authority.
Now to answer, Now to answer questions or request documents on adopted or proposed regulations, members need to ensure that one inquiry point exists. So let's have a look at the responsibilities now of the inquiry point, the NEP. So the NEP is responsible for answering all reasonable questions and providing relevant documents, including on SPS regulations adopted or proposed within the country, control, inspection, approval procedures, risk assessment procedures, membership and participation in international and regional SPS organizations and systems, membership and participation in bilateral and multilateral agreements and arrangements within the scope of the SPS agreement. And finally, members need to designate a government authority for the implementation of the notification procedures that have been presented earlier. Specifically, NNA's responsibilities include to publish a notice at an early stage to enable members to become acquainted with a proposal to introduce a particular regulation, to submit notifications, to provide copies of the draft regulation upon request, and to handle comments. More generally, the NNA is the entity that oversees the notification process, cooperates with technical experts, including to coordinate responses to comments received. So in summary, the NEP is responsible for providing answers to all reasonable questions from interested members, as well as for the provision of relevant documents. There can be more than one NEP, so it has to be at least one inquiry point, and can be the same entity as the NNA. For the NNA, it's one national notification authority, single central government authority, and the responsibilities are to implement the notification procedures, submit notifications, and provide open requests to the members copies of the proposed regulation, as well as handling comments. So while there needs to be only one NNA, the NNA and NEP can be the same entity, so and be under the same roof as illustrated in the image, with clear responsibilities defined for the NNA and the NEP. Now, beyond obligations contained in the SPS agreement that we just discussed, the NNA or NEP can, of course, also take additional responsibilities or initiatives, such as tracking, filtering, disseminating SPS documents and notifications to interested parties, stakeholders, alert other government agencies, private sector, other stakeholders of important changes, coordinate, submit comments on national notifications of concern for trading partners, and follow up. Lead, facilitate, participate in national SPS coordination body. It can be a SPS national committee body or other mechanisms of coordination. Participate in the SPS committee work, changing information, specifically also on STCs, for example. and raise awareness at the national level, facilitate capacity building, and seek assistance if needed. So as you can see, there are a wide range of responsibilities that can be under the NNA or NEP. Now, let's have a look at some practical information and statistics. The NNA's and NEP's contact information can be found on ePing. So officials with notification admin rights can update these details directly on ePing. Now, some statistics. This graphic displays the total number of notifications by year since 1995, as well as the number of members that submitted at least one notification by year. So we can observe a significant increase over the years from about 200 notifications submitted in 1995 to close to 2,000 notifications in recent years. So we had a record high of 2,172 notifications in 2022. In 2023, 65 members submitted at least one notification. So the number of members submitting notifications each year has considerably increased since 1985, and has remained relatively stable over the past few years, as you can see the yellow line here on the graph. And now we can also look at geographical regions from which the notifications submitted since 1995 originated. And we can see that the largest share of notifications come from Asia, 29%, followed by North America region, 25%, and then by South America, Central America, and the Caribbean with 24%. And to conclude with these statistics, some facts and figures from last year. So there were about 2,000 notifications, 1,994 notifications submitted by 65 members. So this is accounting for addenda, corrigenda, and revisions to both regular and emergency. So two least developed countries, Tanzania and Uganda, are among the top 10 notifiers of regular notifications in 2023. Also interesting to note that many of these notifications are joint notifications from the East Africa community. And the highest share of regular notifications submitted refer to food safety. This is 73%. And 89% of the emergency notifications submitted refer to animal health. Okay, so now we can move to work since the fifth review that was concluded in 2020, sorry. In the context of the fifth review, we had a workshop on transparency and coordination in 2019. So in the workshop, members highlighted the importance of ePing. This was the old system, actually, as a communication platform. The report of the fifth review, as I said, adopted in 2020, included some recommendations encouraging members to implement appropriate national coordination mechanisms to enable consultation and communication and strengthen internal SPS coordination. Continue sharing experiences on their national coordination mechanisms and discuss strategies and approaches to improve SPS coordination and engagement at the national level. It also included one recommendation requesting the Secretariat to prepare a collection of resources that was contained in GSPS Gen 1850 Rev 1. Yes, actually there is a typo there. It should be Rev 1. To assist members in implementing their national SPS coordination mechanisms. And there was also a recommendation on their notification procedures and transparency related to notification of measures falling under both SPS and TBT agreements. And so we'll discuss it later in the next session. Now, some highlights of the transparency related work. related to transparency. So in 2020, we had the e-agenda system or platform became available. We will also say we will explain it a little bit later, give more detail on e-agenda. In 2021, it was a trade concern database that became available for specific searches on trade concerns. In 2022, we had the last workshop on transparency where we was the opportunity to introduce you to EPING, to the EPING SP activity platform that had been launched in 2022, actually. And then the launch was there in July 2022. The workshop was just a little bit earlier in June, and then the official launch in July, sorry. And then we also had the Transparency Champions course. That was for the first time we had this Champions course in two segments, or in several segments, one in October 2022, 1 week, then implementation of action plans, working with the participants of the course to implement their action plan on transparency with coaches. And then in June, coming back last June, to report on the results of this implementation. And we're very happy to see some familiar faces in the room. Some of these champions are in the room. And we hope to continue with this program. We hope to organize actually another champions courses this year. And then in 2023, we had, as mentioned, the GSPS 7-5, the transparency procedures that were revised. Again, it was a technical revision. No substantive changes were made to the recommended transparency procedures. And then, of course, the current workshop on transparency that we're having today and tomorrow. So now here we have in the current review, the 6th review that was launched in November, we have also transparency related proposals, and they are summarized on this slide from several members. Here is just a summary of these proposals. Of course, you have more information on this compilation, the document there in red, GSPS Gen 2194 Rev1. Compilation of all proposals received in the context of the 6th review. So you can refer to that for more information, but just to say a few words, we can see a proposal from Brazil regarding comments, how to take them into account, the fact of notifying at an early stage, so having a separate standing agenda item on notifications for specifically on comments, so the focus on comments. Canada, there is a reference to Article 7 in Canada, the SPS agreement of areas for consideration. The EU, the European Union, to improve the quality of notifications, comments on notification and replies. And this rings a bell to the context of the 4th review. There were already proposals also from European Union, Norway, Morocco, if I remember correctly, also in that sense. And also on transparency in the context of approval procedures, building on the recommendations of the working group on approval procedures that concluded its work last year. New Zealand, they are referring to notification under both SPS and TVT agreements, how to improve that, ways to improve it, and perhaps using also improvements to the system. And we're going to see this in more in detail. And the US on encouraging members to enhance transparency in practices, policies, and regulations to address misinformation and disinformation, and this in relation to the interesting thematic session we had last year. And next, please. So we will be discussing a more on notification under both the SPS and TPT agreements in the next session. So we'll have a closer look at the, or we'll discuss it more on these proposals. And here to conclude with this first part on the provisions, just to remind some resources. The statistics were extracted from our annual report on transparency and specific trade concerns, which you might remember now that these two reports have been combined into one, the Gen 804 and Gen 204. Anything related to transparency is available from the Transparency Toolkit webpage, accessible from our SPS webpage. And then there you can also have access to the compilation of decisions, major decisions from August 2023. It will be updated now to incorporate the additional documents, for, including the SPS declaration, and the practical manual for SPS, NNAs, and NEPs, which will need to be updated. And perhaps needs to be updated to reflect the EPING platform, changes to the platform tools, and also additional information may be included, resulting from the discussions in this workshop. That's something that can be considered. So now we can move to the online transparency tools and sources of SPS information. Hand it to you, Nazia.
Thank you. So as mentioned, the second half of this presentation will provide a brief overview of online transparency tools and sources of SPS information. So here we will start with the WTO Documents Online Database. So the WTO Documents Online Database provides access to all official WTO documentation in English, French, and Spanish from 1995 onwards. This includes, of course, SPS-related documents in the 3 working languages. The database comprises several different search interfaces. You can find SPS documents, for example, under Documents for Meetings, or by using the search module for more advanced searches. It is also possible for users to sign up for an email alert service on documents of interest, including, again, SPS documents. Moving now to other key sources of SPS information. Since 2020, 3 SPS online transparency tools have been launched. In 2020, the e-Agenda was launched. In 2021, the Trade Concerns Database went live. And in 2022, the EPING, SPS, and TBT platform was launched. All of these also contain TBT information. So we will now provide a brief overview of each of these platforms. Then we will take a look at the main functions of the EPING, SPS, and TBT platform. So let us begin with e-Agenda. Rolando.
SPS e-Agenda was launched in 2020, as mentioned earlier, and e-Agenda is a collaborative online platform which provides an electronic version of the SPS committee agenda. It allows registered members to prepare for the committee meeting by adding interventions under any item in the proposed agenda, including to raise and support STCs. Delegates can also follow the discussion of STCs in real time, and statements can be uploaded before and during the meeting. So, of course, all of you who are following the SPS committee should be now familiar by now with the agenda. It's an interface also provides some data on the meeting, such as the number of STCs raised, number of members raising and responding to STCs, and you can see those in the colored boxes at the top. In addition to that, users can also download documents related to previous meeting, such as agendas and summary reports, as well as statements related to STCs, specific trade concerns. And the practical guide is now available on e-Agenda, and this is the first time for this week that a tab overview of the committee week is available with all the activities of the committee week in one page. This was incorporated to facilitate access to all the information that relates to the committee week. Before it was to the members webpage, so now everything is on e-agenda. And next, the trade concerns database provide access to information on trade concerns. We have discussed it. It is also available publicly, and it includes any discussions on trade concerns, including STCs, the specific trade concerns discussed under the SPS committee. One can search for STCs, as I said, for example, by ID, and it will provide a record of the discussions that took place on that specific STC in different meetings, as well as some other information, such as any related notifications. It is also possible to explore, visualize, and filter STCs by meeting, number of time raised, keywords, products, reported status, and more. Users can also access member profiles to see the members' participation in the discussion of trade concerns, such as the number of items raised, supported, and responded to. You can also find some graphics on concerns, such as the numbers of STCs raised by year. And in addition, the website contains links to useful resources and definitions of relevant terms, such as member supporting, raising, or resolved concerns, or partially resolved concerns, and more. And of course, the ePing SPS TBT platform officially launched in July 2022, which integrates the old SPS and TBT IMSs and NSSs, you remember the information management systems and the notification submission systems, and the old ePing alert system. So all these old tools were merged into one platform, the ePing, to modernize the tool. It was needed, but also to have everything under one database, one system to facilitate searches on SPS and TBT information. So so with a single sign-on, delegates with access right can also navigate easily between e-agenda and ePing. There is a link to access e-agenda from ePing. And users with additional rights have a wider range of functions available. For example, they can submit notifications and also use the platform for outreach and communication purposes. And we'll come back to this in a moment. Just to note that the interface is, of course, available in the 3 WTO working languages, English, French, and Spanish, as well as in Portuguese. Additional languages may be available soon. It is possible and recommended to sign up to receive alerts on notifications of interest. And currently, there are about 20,000 registered users from public and private sectors, academia, international organizations, and more. Before going to the next slides, perhaps, Mr. Chair, we can make a little break here.
Thank you, Rolando. That's a very good idea. First, thank you for taking us through the transparency provisions in the SPS agreement and on the SPS transparency related work, as well as on the online transparency tools. I do find very interesting all the statistics that you have provided. It really showcases the amount of work that this committee has done in the last few years, and it is a huge amount of work. That must be very clear to all of us. Also, shout out to Tanzania and Uganda for doing all of that work in providing their notifications. That's an impressive amount of work, and it deserves to be recognized. So, I wish to congratulate both of them. So at this stage, I would like to open the floor to see if there are any questions or comments on the presentations provided by the Secretariat at this point. We still have enough time, so do not be shy. This is a committee, but this is also a community. We are meant to help each other, so please don't be afraid to raise your flags. Okay, so perhaps I will do the warm-up. That's my job. So I have a quick question here. There is a lot there are a lot of elements on trade facilitation in the notifications, right? There is this case where members notified measures that are related to trade facilitation. So here my question will be, who determines when a measure is trade facilitating, and how do they usually determine that case? So of course, I will not put the secretariat in an awkward position, but perhaps you can have some insights on how that usually happens based on the notifications provided to date. So that would be my first warm-up question. If once again, if you have any insights onto that.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, very good question. On trade facilitating measures, it's perhaps worth reminding that there is a specific checkbox in the notifications to identify whether a measure is trade facilitating. And as we have seen, the fact of being trade facilitating means that normally there is no need to allow for 60-day comment period. It's still always recommended to have 60-day comment, but it could be less if the notifications assumed to be trade facilitating. Having said that, it's important to note that again, this is a decision by the member, notifying member, that will be it might be subjective, and there is no, of course, the agreement is silent on what is a trade facilitating measure. We have recommendations in GSPS 7 Rev 5 that make reference to trade facilitating measures, providing there is a footnote that provides some examples. It could be, for example, if there was a ban and you lift a ban, that's clearly a trade facilitating measure. If you were requesting for 20 documents to receive approval for exporting, and now so, less documentation and perhaps less time to process this information, it should be trade facilitating. So this could be good justifications to check the box. And these notifications can be identified in the system with a specific search of notifications that are considered as trade facilitating, those that have checked the checkbox. Having said that, again, this is information from members and is not checked by the secretariat and is not, yes, it's not checked. Yeah. Nadia, if you want to add anything?
That's okay. I had the same information.
Thank you, Rolando. I see the flag of Mr. George Opeyu from Uganda. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And also, I would like to thank the Secretariat, Rolando and Nazia, for the presentation so far. So on the issue of who decides whether a measure that is being notified is trade facilitating, I think the Secretary Rolando has responded, maybe from the Secretariat perspective and in relation to the guidance that has been given by the committee. But to share our experience, one, notification to the SPS and TBT committees are drafted by the drafter of our measures. So the government officials who draft national, let me call it country, as well as regional, in this context, the East African Community measures, they also draft the notifications. And in most cases, they are the one who decide to what extent the measure that is being notified is trade facilitating. And one of the criteria they use for deciding is the level of alignment to relevant international standards. So if the requirements of the draft measure that is being notified is greatly aligned to the contents of relevant international standards, then in that case, they will check that box when they're drafting the notification to indicate that the measure that is being notified is trade facilitating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Opillo. That was a very excellent comment. So I would like to see more flags like with that type of comment. No pressure, Mr. Quiroz. Ecuador, please go ahead.
Bueno, muchísimas
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd also like to thank the Secretariat for the presentation. I just have one question. We've seen cases of when a country had to notify on trade facilitation, and I'd like to get the Secretariat's understanding at the process that notification should go through with regard to time for comments and for entry into force. Should it adapt to what we already had, and that is the minimum of 6 months for entry into force, or for a trade facilitation measure, could the time frame be shorter? Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador. So I think we can begin with the. So if you want to react to the comment and the question, go ahead, Rolando.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair.
Just that's just a reaction to Uganda's comment, George comments on that's very interesting to hear. Always how the domestic level regulators work and how they prepare and work on these SPS notifications before they're submitted. Yes, interesting to hear that in this is you see again what we're saying that that's members have margin for this checkbox, and here is the element of international standards, the use of international standard that is considered. Perhaps just knowing that there are also checkboxes for that, or information can be provided in terms of if there is there's a question on is there any relevant international standard for the measure that is being drafted. So you can check Codex, WOHA, or IPPC and identify the standard. And there is an additional checkbox for conformity that was added in the Ref 3 of the transparency provision, whether you consider that the draft measure is conforming, so it's basically the same than the international standard, to check that. Now on the comments from Ecuador, yes, very good questions, and of course we can see that this is a very good question. We also have we touched a little bit this morning on it, and recommendations. What do they say for trade facilitating measures? The comment period could be shorter, or even not provide a comment period. That's what the recommendations say. And the same for the interval between publication and entry into force. If trade facilitating, remember Nazia before, it could be enter into force right away because it's supposed to be trade facilitating, so there is no reason to delay. Having said that, we'll recommend still always to provide a comment period and an interval of time between publication and entry into force. If not 60 days, it could be 30 days for the comments or less. The same for the entry into force, maybe not necessary to wait for 6 months, but just to still allow for comments. It's always good to hear from your trading partners when you're, adopting a new legislation, to make sure that, it is, I mean, you identified it as trade facilitating, but that's trade facilitating also by your partners, and that there is no, important comment that might come in. So that will be a suggestion.
Thank you, Rolando. Yes, sorry, I don't see your flag, but I'll give you the floor. Oh, Pakistan. Yes, please go ahead.
I have just one comment on this trade facilitation. One measure could be at the same time trade facilitative, but same time for some other members it could be trade restrictive. So then what should be done? Then what would be the preference? Say for example, let me say the very common example, when a member country draws regulation that we since onwards 1st April 2024 we will accept only the electronic phytosanitary certificate from the country of origin. So it is a trade facilitation because there is no need to of hard copy to reach to the destination and for that, and it is a trade facilitation measure that is being taken. But the countries which didn't have such facility, so they for them it will be a trade restrictive. So then what guidance is provided here in this with respect to these such type of, this is only example. There are such other measures which countries normally adopt or do for that purpose without observing the comment period.
Thank you, Pakistan. Excellent question. I'm so glad I don't need to answer one of those. Should I? No, shouldn't. Oh, I think those are excellent questions, and I may add one to those for you to react. Let's say the member that presents its notification indicating that it's a trade facilitating measure receives comments and considers that it may need to provide more time, extend the deadlines, whether including for comments or even for the implementation after the first notification. How should the member proceed in terms of notifying again or providing a revised notification, an addendum? How would that take forward in the context of the SPS committee? That may also provide some insights on what's next, right? When you have this type of situation where your partners may not consider that what you are saying to be a trade facilitating measure may actually not be the case. How do you adapt to that situation and how you reflect on that in the context of the SPS transparency? So I see Pakistan interested in taking, but please go ahead.
This is, with your excuse, I would like to add to your question which you have raised after my question. Actually, one thing is that the country who is going to notify that regulation, how that country should proceed or the member should proceed further in such situation. And the other thing is, if the country has promulgated or notified that regulation, that is trade keeping in view the situation or the recommendation of the committee that this is trade facilitative without observing the comment period. And at the same time, it is becoming restrictive for the other member. And then member shows concern that this has been done without observing the comment period, and it is trade restrictive for me, then what that member should do?
Thank you for that question. So this will be the last round before we continue because we have to continue with the presentations, but please, Rolando, for any reactions, or Nadia.
Yeah, thank you very much. Where to start from? Maybe from Pakistan. You were here this morning, so we had a couple of exercises to cover that. I think what you can do when you have a notification, you need to request an extension, or you need more. There is an issue with a notification. What can you do? So you will need to enter into bilateral discussions. You need to contact first the NNA or NP to request additional information on the measure. Then you can, of course, also use other channels and discuss that. For example, if you can come to the committee and raise concerns if you get there. But yes, at that level already to request for more information. On the question of how do you request if you need more time. So you can also, of course, you should always try if you need time, because it might take time. So to collect comments at the domestic level, you need more time to react, to provide your comments, to ask for more time, possible. If it was less than 60 days, to at least ask them to provide you at least the recommended 60 days. If they provided about 60 days, you can still extend it to 30 days. You can ask for 30 extra days. And that's also in the recommendation, especially for developing countries when they're encountering difficulties with certain requirements. So that's built in the recommendations, and also in the decision on S&D There is a decision on special and differential treatment on enhancing transparency for S&D. So when a developing country is facing an issue, they can contact the member, the notifying member, the member that is taking this measure, and to either to discuss the possibility to have a more time to implement, or if needed, a technical assistance. So that's something also that to keep in mind. I don't know. Yeah. Nasia, anything else? Thank you. Thank you, Nasia. Yes, of course. And that was, I think, the question maybe you raised, Mr. Chair, on how to proceed. If you are extending the comment period, it should be an addendum. Should be through an addendum that can read jointly with the original notification. So if you're extending the comment period or you're changing a date, you can do that through an addendum.
Thank you, Rolando. So colleagues, I see 2 flags there, but before I give you the floor, I would like to continue with the presentations, and we will have another Q&A part of it, but I would like to finish with this presentation. But I will you can keep your flags raised, no problem. Just we'll come back with your questions at the end of this presentation. Is that okay? Yes? Okay, let's do that. But Rolando, go ahead.
Okay, so before we paused, Rolando provided an overview of what ePing contains, and now we will take a closer look at the 3 main functions of the platform. These are to search or stay informed, communicate, and submit notifications to the WTO. So first, how can ePing help you stay informed? Well, next please. ePing helps users to stay informed by providing access to different types of transparency-related information. The general public, for example, has access to notifications, specific trade concerns discussed in the SPS and TBT committee, and other types of facts and figures, including member profiles. And we will soon come back to this. Before that, we would like to just quickly note that registration is free, and registered users have access to additional features. As mentioned, they can receive notification alerts. They can save favorites and filters for notifications, for instance, if interested in SPS only or TBT only. And they can use the national forum, if it is activated, to discuss notifications with other domestic users. So tomorrow at the ePing clinic, we will discuss some of these functions in more detail. For now, we will show just a few examples of the types of information available on the platform. ePing contains a number of advanced search functions, including very practical filters to help you quickly find different types of specific information. So in practice, let's take a look at how this works. Let's say you export poultry products and are looking for notifications related to avian influenza affecting your country or territory. So you will go to notifications in the search menu. Then you click on search more fields. Then you see an SPS only button. It should be coming up now. You click in keywords and then you select avian influenza. Then you can click in regions or countries likely to be affected, and there you can select your country or territory from the drop-down. Interestingly, ePing also indicates when a notification has been related to a trade concern. So in the list of notification results, when you see this little purple icon under the member's name, it means that a trade concern is related to the notification. And if you want to see which trade concern, simply click on the icon or on the notification symbol. Next. So it is also possible to search for specific trade concerns on ePing, as I mentioned. For instance, if you need to find information on STC discussed in 2023 related to a particular topic, let's say control, inspection, and approval procedures, in the search menu, select trade concerns, then select SPS as the area and set the timeline to 2023. Then click on search more fields. Then you will see SPS keywords. You can select control, inspection, and approval procedures here from the drop-down. And then you can click on any trade concern from the list provided for more information on the discussion in the SPS committee. We also talked about the different types of facts and figures available on ePing, including member profiles. So how can this be useful? Let's say you are preparing for a meeting and need to find a quick overview of a member's engagement in the SPS committee. For example, on its notifications, STCs, other documents, and more. Where could you find this? On ePing, go to Facts and Figures on the homepage, then select Member Profiles. You click on the member, and you will be directed to a summary page of its activities. That includes information on its NNA, NEP, notifications, STCs, and more. On the profile page of the member, you can select SPS to see more on its SPS engagement only. And the page you are seeing here is the SPS only view. So this is just to show you how the member profile provides this type of information overview in one page for both SPS and TBT. ePing also contains other SPS documents. If, for example, you need to quickly find documents submitted by one of the three sisters, how can you find this? You can go to Other Documents in the search menu, then you select SPS as the area and click on Search More Fields. Then go to Submitting Observer Organizations and select the relevant organization from the drop-down menu. There you will see the list of documents. And just to add here that in Other Documents, you can also find documents submitted by a particular member or observer government, and those circulated by the Secretariat, including those related to the committee meeting, from the chairperson, and more. Turning now to the second main function, the communication functions. ePing's communication functions allow users to communicate on notifications of interest at the national and international level. Let's explain now a bit about how these functions work. So the platform provides two key tools to comment and follow up on notifications. First is the National Forum, which any registered user can use to discuss notifications with other domestic ePing users, including, of course, government officials who are involved in the notification process. To post on the National Forum, all the user has to do is click this icon next to the notification. Then, if the National Forum is activated, this is what they will see. From there, the comment can be added and a file uploaded if they wish. Importantly, as I mentioned, the National Forum must be activated to be available for registered domestic ePing users to use it. So who activates it? It is the user with outreach admin rights in a country that can activate it, and that is normally the NEP. Another key communication function is the International Forum, which can be used to share information on notifications with other members. On the International Forum, users with outreach admin rights, this is usually, again, the NEP, can post comments and discuss notifications with other members. The International Forum can also be used to share unofficial translations, as we mentioned in the first part of this presentation. As you can see, the interface is very similar to the National Forum. However, again, only users with outreach admin rights can post on the International Forum. And when a comment is posted, anyone will be able to see it. So in addition to posting on the International Forum and activating or deactivating the National Forum, which we just discussed, users with outreach admin rights have additional communication functions available. They can see the full list of national users, and they can reach out to them, for example, by creating groups of relevant stakeholders for example, by sector. They can also chat with outreach admin users from other members directly on the platform. These additional functionalities will be further discussed at tomorrow's ePing clinic. So before I hand over to Rolando, let me just add that NEPs interested in requesting outreach admin rights should send an email to spscommittee@wto.org.
So last but not least, the notification submission functions. So as mentioned earlier, the ePing platform is the most efficient way to submit notifications to the WTO. Why? Because it's improves the quality and completeness by notifying online. If there is any error, it will be prompted. So you cannot submit a notification with some missing fields or some incomplete information. It also makes the process much faster, quicker. And it can also improve domestic coordination in the sense that there are different levels of access of rights. So it might help also to coordinate internally who should be drafting notifications, who should be controlling them, verifying them, and then submitting them to the WTO. So these are on the right side of the screen. You can see the different type of rights, admin rights. You can have notification drafting rights. So that allows government officers to only create notifications, but not submit them, to create, to prepare them. Submission rights is prepare and submit. And the admin is the user or users with admin rights can draft and submit, but also grant drafting and or submission rights to other users, the country, and update the contact information of the NNA NEP. So then the country now members are autonomous in managing the users that can draft, submit notifications, and update. They are now in charge of updating the contact information. Before, you will send us an email and we will do the work for you. And now, so we have seen the different options of ePing, or the functions of ePing. So let's see now how all this will work together. So yes, let's illustrate how ePing can help track and follow up on SPS regulatory changes. So we have seen now all the animations are there, but basically you have the notifying member will submit to the WTO notification when it's ready for submission on bananas here. And this for us, the Secretariat, to check it and process it. And once it's ready for circulation, it will be circulated. And through all, as you know, all documents are circulated through Docs Online, and right away it will be available on ePing. So that will be instantaneously. This information, this notification will be available on ePing. And so if you are registered on ePing, you will receive an alert on this notification. So it can be anyone. It's, again, public, anyone can register to receive alerts, public sector, government, research, academia, anyone will be receiving notification. And then there is the possibility to also, for the inquiry point, to circulate the notification to specific stakeholders. If those, for people that are, or users that are not registered, or, that's also part of the responsibility of the inquiry point, to identify stakeholders that might be interested in this notification, and then have also discussions on the notification. If there are comments, to collect the comments, to discuss it, and then through the inquiry point to be submitted to the notifying member. Another the inquiry point to submit to the notifying member, hopefully within the comment period of 60 days, if the notifying member provided at least 60 days, or it can be more. Some members, they provide more time also. That's also would be an extra recommendation is if you can provide more time, the more the better for members to react. So that this is with this, I think it's to nicely show, you know, how it can really help government producers with the handling of comments, receiving alerts and commenting on notifications. And next, some statistics, some facts and figures. Almost half of registered tipping users are public sector. And then closely followed by the private sector and others. So almost 50% are registered users from the government, 40% private sector, and then others, as I said, research. It can be international other organizations, standardizing bodies, academia. In 2023, almost all notifications were submitted online through the platform, through ePing. And for TBT, it's very similar. It's even like 100%. About 260 users have SPS admin rights. So about 55% outreach admin rights and 45% notification admin rights. And these are from 75 members. And the SPS National Forum has been activated by around 14% of member governments. So about 25 members or so have activated their national forum. And finally, you can use the contact us button for any queries, questions, comments to the Secretariat. There are some also videos, tutorials that are available on their resources. If you need assistance, you can, of course, contact the Secretariat, us, through also SPS committee mailbox, but you can also request national activities, technical activities. We have had a surge of requests for related to transparency and the use of the tools and ePing the past few years. The more information is on the Gen 997, the last revision 14 that was circulated earlier this year, with all SPS TA related activities and how to apply. And also worth noting this document, the Gen 2163, for more information on the levels of access for ePing users. So it summarizes nicely the different users' rights that as we try to do through this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Rolando. Once again, excellent presentation, Zia Rolando. Once again, incredible statistics. We have amazing platforms, but it is also evident that we need to use them more for them to be more useful to all of us. So with that, I will open the floor. We already have two colleagues that wish to present their comments or questions. Mr. Opillo, Mr. Nunez. Mr. Opillo, you have the floor, followed by Mr. Nunez. Mr. Opillo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again, Rolando and Nazia, for the presentation. Chair, I wanted to, I think, more of share our experience in Uganda in relation to requests for extension of comment periods. Chair, we receive many requests from all categories of WTO membership. Of course, the developed, least developed and developing members. And I think Ronaldo has already guided on how maybe at international level, multilateral level, you can use an addendum maybe to indicate that you have accepted the request and you have extended the comment period. But what has been going on in Uganda is that we have been handling this on bilateral because it will come through bilateral means. So what we do when a member requests for an extension of comment period, the main reasons that is given in the request normally is that the time is not provided in notification, and we try as much as possible to respect the TBT and SPS committee's recommendation of 60 days comment period. is not adequate to them, for them to do adequate consultation and get feedback from their domestic stakeholders, in most cases from the private sector. So we handle it on a case-by-case basis, and most of the time, actually, we do grant the request, and in most cases, the request is for an additional 30 days. So if the request comes when it is not too close to the end of the comment period, we do grant the request. And then we wait for the comments to come, and we consider the comments and take into account the comments. But when it comes, when it is too close, then we may not grant the request, but we still encourage the member to submit the comments. In most cases, most of the measures that we notify to the WTO are subjected to systematic review within 5 years, and sometimes less, because also when we begin implementing the measure, sometimes we also get feedback from our private sector, from industry, that there's some issues here that it is difficult to comply with. So sometime even before the 5-year systematic review period has been, we reach that period, sometime the review of the measure is actually triggered, and comments that could have come after the comment period, and we have not granted the request for extension or comment, we give them, and then we use them, reviewing the measures and take them into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment, Mr. Opillo. And ahora le cedo la palabra.
Now I give the floor to Claudio Nunez from Chile. Chile, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Allow me to thank you for your initial question on trade facilitating measures, which really facilitated my question. To start with, I would like to talk about ePing. It is a very useful tool. It is quite easy to use and has facilitated access to different stakeholders, both from private and public, and regulators and non-regulators, including academia. Many people can keep up to date directly through this portal, and they don't have to go through the national portal where they can find information. This portal is therefore very useful, and it really streamlines the whole process. However, and this is linked to my question that I'd like to raise, is that often we receive this question in our team, is when one person goes to notify something that is a trade facilitation measure that is linked to a notification of a regulation that has already been established. From the Secretariat's point of view, or perhaps from a member who already has come across this, is what option is best to use? Which is the best option in order to obtain that information, and not someone who is linked to the SPS committee? Who should we contact for that? Because if it's not a general notification, it may be a new notification that is modifying previous information provided by a notification. If we create a revision, as we have seen beforehand, it means that this revision would become the new notification. So the regulation may only just have changed in one thing, which could be quite important, but other aspects could still remain in the original notification. If it is a corrigendum, however, I don't think there is an option to do so. So I'm not sure which option would be the best to use, a corrigendum or a revision. What are the recommendations from you? What should we use, and how should we go about informing ourselves to ensure that a general notification can be created, and that it is only changing something in a previous notification? How would you recommend we deal with this type of situation, bearing in mind that these may not be people who work directly with the SPS committee? Thank you.
Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much, Claudio. I don't see any other questions. Yes, back there.
Perdón, sería Ucrania.
Ukraine, to be followed by China. Please, could you be as brief as possible?
Interventions, please, so that we don't go over time. Ukraine followed by China, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Rolando and Nazia for their presentations. And I have a follow-up question to what has been discussed during the previous round of Q&A. I'm interested in the document GSPS 33 Ref 1. And paragraph 6 of this document says that an important member that provides special and differential treatment to the exporting member should submit a notification to the Secretariat as an addendum to the original notification. And I tried to find relevant notifications and I failed. Maybe I did something wrong, but I'm just wondering how often this procedure is used and what types of solutions are used most often. Thank you.
Thank you, Ukraine. China, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for the presentation. I just have a simple question to ask a short time. Just wondering, is this a default setting for admin users to have the right to activate the national and international forum, or do I have to send email to specially ask for it? Thank you.
Okay, so let's begin with that one and then with the other ones. I'm doing their work already. Rolando, Nadia, you have the floor.
Okay, so thank you, China, for your question. Yes, to request admin rights, be it notification admin rights or outreach admin rights on the platform, yes, you would just need to send an email to spscommittee@wto.org, and then we will get in touch with you. Thank you. There was also a question from Ukraine on notification format for S&D. Yes, and as we highlighted also in the sessions this morning, there is a specific notification format for S&D treatment. However, there has never been any notification of S&D treatment, so that would perhaps explain why you're unable to find it on the platform.
Yes, thank you. So if there is an interest to notify, please contact us and we can put that in place with the new system. Then there were other questions from. Sorry, Ukraine wants to take the floor.
I'm just wondering if this procedure itself has ever been used.
Thank you.
What types of solutions are used most often? I mean, a change in the map or provision of special and differential treatment. If you have any kind of statistics, maybe.
Yes, thank you very much, Ukraine. So the short answer is it has never been used. We as of today, we haven't received any notification under this procedure, S&D. And that will be to notify whether a member has granted some special and differential treatment, to explain what was in what it consisted. And there is a format that is there, but in the system, but needs to be sorry, it's available, but it's not under the search, if not mistaken. But it's possible to normally to do it, but we can come back to you on that one. But please, there have been never any notification on S&D, so difficult to know what type of S&D treatment they could be requested. Yes, of course. So maybe I don't know if I explained myself correctly, but when I said there has been never a notification submitted to the review, it doesn't mean that there has not been S&D granted to a member or technical assistance. Of course, we will see also in the committee when members present their technical assistance programs, they have many members provide bilateral technical assistance. They have a huge program of TA. So it doesn't mean that this is not happening, but under the decision itself, there has been no notification submitted to the secretariat. Then yes, on the question of Chile, a very good question. Yes, and that's we discussed a little bit earlier this morning. Correct. When you do substantive changes to a notification that was submitted, it should be done on a revision, right? A revision will replace the original notification because there is a substantive change. Really, the text of the draft notification, maybe there is a wider coverage of products, or the requirements have changed. So it's significant changes that cannot be incorporated in an addendum. Otherwise, the alternative will be if it's something still that is still valid in the notification. I mean, it's a minor change or an addition to it, then you could do an addendum, and the addendum will read together with the original notification. So, the addendum could explain what is new or what has been changed or added to the other notification. But if these changes are quite important, because maybe, there is a new draft of the notification, and then you are now having a new period of comments, and then in that case, yes, the revision will be the appropriate format. Now the question on how to inform on what will be the change. I mean, the change will be perhaps in the description of the notification. Will explain that you are submitting a revision to a former notification, and briefly explain what are the changes, or provide maybe a link or a contact person where you can get more information on the changes. That will be also in the notification, of course. So perhaps that could be an option. And that's it, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Rolando. And this has been a really rich exchange already. So it's going great, I think. Thank you very much, and thanks to all that presented their comments and questions. With this, we conclude session 1. I would like to thank once again the Secretariat for the information provided. And we are now moving towards session 2, which will be about linkages with transparency-related work in the Activity Committee. During this session, we will discuss notifications of SPS and activity measures, as well as ongoing transparency-related initiatives within the Activity Committee. I will now ask Ms. Serra Airal and Mr. George Opillo to please come up to the podium. Okay. Let me first give the floor to Mr. Rolando Alcalá, once again, WTO Secretariat at the SPS section, who will be providing an overview of notification of SPS and activity measures. This presentation will also involve an interactive portion where participants will need a laptop or smartphone. We hope everyone will participate in this portion. So we go interactive here. Rolando, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So perhaps next, thank you. Yes, as we have seen in the first session just now, transparency is one of the core principles of the WTO and present horizontally across all legal text. And transparency provisions contained in both the SPS and activity agreement are very similar, actually, as summarized in this slide. We have, and also you have also summarized the provisions and the legal instruments, relevant instruments for SPS and TBT. So we have seen the obligations of notifying draft regulations, publishing regulations promptly, establishing an inquiry point, and designating one notification authority. For TBT, there are two additional notification obligations, one-time notification of statement of implementation and notifications from standardizing bodies to notify a notification of acceptance of the code of good practice. And perhaps we can have more information on this in the next presentation. With Sarah, of course, from the TBT team. Now, perhaps it's worth just reminding the objectives of the agreement, the SPS and TBT agreements. So if we're looking at the coverage of SPS and TBT agreements, so what is the purpose? So both agreements recognize the sovereign right of members to take measures to protect life and health or to fulfill other legitimate objectives while ensuring that these measures do not result in arbitrary and unnecessary barriers to trade. So one way the agreements help strike this balance and avoid unnecessary barriers to trade is by strongly encouraging members to follow international standards. Now on the coverage, worth recalling that what is the coverage, what is an SPS measure? So you have to refer to Annex A of the agreement. So any measure that is taken to achieve one of the specific objectives identified under Annex A is considered an SPS measure. And that will be to protect human or animal life or health from risk arising from additives, contaminant, toxins, or disease-causing organisms in food, beverages, or feedstuff, such as pesticide maximum residue levels, to protect human life or health from plant or animal carrier diseases. So that will be to protect against zoonotic risks, for example, on BSE-related restrictions, bovine spongiformopathy. To protect animal or plants from pest diseases or disease-causing organisms, for example, to protect plants against fruit fly or animals against foot and mouth disease. And finally, to protect a territory of a member from other damage caused by the entry, establishment, or spread of pests. For the TBT, the agreement is about the type of the measure that is taken. So it applies to technical regulations, which are mandatory, standards, voluntary, and conformity assessment procedures for all products, industrial and agricultural products. And in terms of objectives, the objectives that a member may pursue under the TBT agreement are not limited in the same way as those that fall under the SPS agreement. For example, TBT measures can be used to meet requirements related to national security, to prevent deceptive practices, to protect human health and safety, to protect animal and plant health, to protect the environment. By contrast, the SPS agreement concerns predefined specific risk, as we have just seen, related to human health, mostly about food safety, and animal, plant health, or life or protection from pests. So now, in terms of what the agreements say, in terms of coverage, we can note that both the SPS and TBT agreements contain provisions or disciplines, provisions disciplining their relationship and scope. There is, for SPS agreement is the Article 1, paragraph 4 of Article 1. Measures covered by basically what it says is that measures covered by the TBT agreement are not affected by the SPS agreement. And paragraph 5 of Article 1 TBT agreement excludes SPS measures from its scope. So this will mean that a TBT measure cannot be an SPS measure and vice versa. Now, so to summarize this, the logical or analytical framework to follow would be to look if you are faced with a measure, or you as a regulator you need to regulate. First of all, is to identify the objective of the measure. If the measure objective falls under one of the SPS objectives, that will be an SPS measure and falling under the SPS agreement. If not, then if it's a technical regulation, a standard or assessment, that it will fall under the TBT agreement. But if not, then it can be something else. No? It can be anything, another non-tariff measure. Now, in terms of discussions in committee discussions, so this issue of SPS versus TBT coverage is not new, as already back in 1996, the TBT and SPS committees jointly as well as separately discussed how to identify and notify measures that may contain SPS and TBT elements. So as background for these early discussions, the SPS committee asked the Secretariat to prepare 2 notes on the issue, and these are GSPS W17 and W32, identifying issues with notifications and presenting some graphs on the coverage. So both backgrounds notes are perhaps still relevant for the current discussions under both SPS and TBT committees. There was another relevant document that was the report of a joint SPS and TBT meeting on transparency procedures that was held in 1995, and the purpose of which was to stimulate a discussion on the procedural aspects of information exchange required by the 2 agreements. And so just to say that referring to this report on W33, makes reference to the notification formats, and one suggestion at the time was made that the committees consider the possibility of developing a single format for both SPS and TBT notifications. So as we have seen, the SPS and TBT agreements, the legal text, contain very similar transparency obligations. However, they do not contain procedural guidance on what to do in cases where a regulation contains both SPS and TBT elements, okay? They are silent on the agreement. But following those early discussions, as we have seen, the SPS committee, but not the TBT committee, adopted a recommendation that when a regulation contains both SPS and TBT measures, it should be notified under both agreements. Preferably with an indication of which part of the regulation falls under the SPS agreement and which part falls under the TBT agreement. And this recommendation is in paragraph 239 of the current procedures. Worth noting that it was already there in Ref 2 of these procedures in 2002. And then there was the workshop in 2019, the workshop on transparency and coordination. I mentioned it earlier during the context of this 5th review. So the objective of this workshop was for members to exchange experiences with transparency-related coordination and with broader domestic coordination mechanisms. But an area of focus was the difference in scope between the SPS and TBT agreements and the notification of measures containing both SPS and TBT elements. Now, on the 5th review, members are encouraged to clearly indicate in their SPS committee notifications when a measure has been notified to another committee. Sorry, I'm referring now to notification procedures. And members should include this information under the. Sorry, I am referring here to the 5th review. Sorry, excuse me. So that there was a recommendation on their notification procedures and transparency in the context of the 5th review also. And encouraging again to clearly indicate in their SPS committee notification when a measure has been notified to another committee. Okay. Interestingly, in the 5th review, the recommendation was to use the other relevant documents and language which are available, which is item 10 of the notification format. And there is also reference to the current procedures, Ref 5, where the recommendation is to use description of content, and that's mostly what members are using. Now, in the context of the 6th review, and you remember this slide we discussed it earlier about several proposals related to transparency. And there is one in particular, the one from New Zealand. So I highlighted 4. Next, please. That refers to enhancing transparency of measures falling under both SPS and TBT agreements. And there is a proposal, 3-step proposal to discuss challenges faced by members' responses to this situation, and possible solutions. For example, increased coordination between the committees, changes in notification formats, or enhancements to the e-ping platform. So that's the current proposal. Of course, it's going to be discussed this week in the informal meeting also when we discuss the proposals. So now we have the little interactive exercise. We like you. We know it's the middle of the afternoon. You might be tired of listening to us. Perhaps we would like to suggest a little exercise and to discuss coverage. A few questions, and so that will be through a Mentimeter. We did something similar through using another system in 2019. So if you have your laptop or your mobile phone, we'll kindly ask you to use them for this. So you can go to the website on the screen, menti.com. So www.menti.com. And then you can use this code on the screen or use the QR code with your phones. I see some of you doing it. And then you can, I believe you can enter your name or your initials. And once you are logged in, we'll begin. We'll give you some time to get in. And perhaps, again, some instructions. So our regulation will appear on the screen. And then you will need to decide whether the regulation is SPS or TBT or both. Selecting the correct answer with your phone. You will have 40 seconds per question. Okay, and then we'll see the result. So, okay. Charging instructions.
Should we wait for them to first get this?
Yeah. We need to advance it.
Yeah, you can go now. You got it? You got it? Maybe you can wait. They're still entering, you see? 115 players. Wow. Sometimes it go down. That's interesting. So maybe we can wait, what, 1 more minute and we go? Okay, shall we go? Yeah? Okay, let's go, Amy. So first question. Ban on the importation of live horses, swine, dogs, and cats because of Nipah virus infection. What do you think, SPS, TBT, or both? Or nothing, or no other thing? Okay, we're getting there. Good. Excellent. Yeah, I don't know, we need to clap, but it seems the majority here, the majority seems to be right here. I see a few answer both, but here it seems quite, based on the information we have, it will be mainly SPS. Nipah virus is a zoonotic bat-borne virus. So to protect humans against this virus, so SPS. Let's move to the next. This one. Okay, so interesting, huh? We have now the pink bar that is in the top. TBT, 74 of you, 28 thought that it was both, and 7 thought that it was SPS. So, well, regulation set quality standards for groundnuts, including marking and packing requirements for sale. So I will think that this is a TBT measure related to quality, packing, many aimed at selling, selling. So, yes, we can move to the next. Regulation on quality, safety, packaging, and labeling for fresh blackberries for consumption. Right. Yes, majority of you got it right again. Well done. This will be both SPS and TBT because it relates to quality, packaging, labeling. That will be for TBT, and safety will be here for SPS. We are assuming here safety of for food safety. Huh? So let's move to the next one. Should I read it also? Containers for edible fats, oils must not contain toxic materials. This provision is not applied to the case where no toxins can migrate into foods. A tough one, huh? So maybe here this was challenging. Huh? Maybe some of you had no time to answer. Maybe we should have provided more time on this one. So SPS 45, TBT 29. It's a little bit closer here, but the gap it's closer, but still the majority is right. Huh? Okay. So it's a little bit the text. It's a little bit confusing. I mean, confusing. It might be a little bit tricky. But basically, it's about risk to protect against risk from migration into food of toxics related to the materials that are used, containers for food, and it does not apply when there is no risk of migration. So this measure it's only for to consider the risk of migration of toxic into the food. That's why it's SPS measure. Okay. And this was the last question. And actually, just to let you know that all these notifications actually are from real notifications, are extracted from real notifications. And do we have a total something else? Or? Excuse me. Yes, there is a last question. Yeah, I forgot about this one. About the tea. The regulation aims to safeguard consumers from toxins in herbal teas. It mandates compliance with strict storage and labeling standards. Okay, so again, here we have a majority of you, 65, replied both SPS and TBT, and that's correct. You have the first sentence is about SPS, toxins in herbal teas. So it's a beverage, so against a food safety risk. And it mandates compliance with storage and labeling standard, that will be TBT, okay? Well, thank you for that, and this is the last question now. For you, and then we can. Did you enjoy this exercise? Well, thank you very much. So it means that this is something that we might consider in the future, maybe in the formal meeting of the SPS committee.
Thank you, Orlando. I really enjoyed it. I don't know who sort of, but you know, it's okay. It was a good interactive exercise. I do appreciate this type of thing because it helps us also break a little bit from the more traditional approaches to this type of. So with that, I will open the floor in case there are one or two very short interventions, questions you may want to provide to this. To the Secretariat, I see UNCTAD. Yes, UNCTAD, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for the organization of the workshop. I have actually two short questions. First is, what if countries submit the notification to the wrong committee, like the quiz we do? Then would the Secretariat change the topic from SPS to TBT or vice versa? Second question is there any discussion going on with respect to the import licensing notification? Because import licensing notification as well covers measures for the protection of health or the national security. So we wonder if there's any referencing discussion also. Thank you.
Thank you, UNCTAD. I don't see any other request. So, oh, I see Morocco. Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Secretariat and the whole WT team for this workshop. My question is concerning SPS and TBT. Why do we typically focus on STC time frames and not SPS, even if they can be notified at the same time? Usually it is STC first and then the species. But for the notifications for species, they usually have to base it on STCs.
Ok.
Thank you, Morocco.
Last flag, please. I have an observer organization raising the flag. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Shawa from COMESA. It's Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. I noticed that the national level activation, the use of the EPING is low at, is it 14%? Is there any reason that is such a low statistic, or do we need to do something to improve the level? Because we believe that's a very good process to resolve the notification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Comesa. I will give the floor now to the Secretariat to answer. Rolando, Natsia, you have the floor. Okay, so we will end the presentations and then we will have the questions. Please, Rolando.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, there is just a couple of slides I wanted to show, and that may help to perhaps also answer some of the questions. I think it was important because it shows actually in practice. No, we did this interactive exercise to see, that sometimes it might be not straightforward to decide whether it has to fall under SPS or TBT or both. And perhaps just to give an idea in terms of notifications submitted by members. Can go to the next. No, before, just before. Yeah. So here, we can identify through EPING, actually, over 500 measures can be identified as having been notified on the both, on the SPS and TBT agreements. And this is using EPING, free text search. If you look for TBT, the word TBT, for SPS, in the area of SPS, looking for TBT, you will find about 500, I'll iterate more. You can do the same in the area of TBT, looking for SPS notification. It will be necessarily, you don't find the same number. And why? Because some notifications are notified on the TBT only or SPS only, and not necessarily on their both, or for the same notifications. And then I wanted to show just two examples quickly on how it looks like. The information in here is summarized on a notification that has been submitted to both. Usually here an example from Uganda, and actually we'll hear from Uganda in a moment. The objective of the measure is food safety for this measure. And this is about standards, specified requirements, sampling and test methods for fish meal used in compounding animal feeds. So there is an SPS element and a TBT element. In the notification, the title of notification will be the same. The objectives are different: food safety for SPS and consumer information labeling, prevention of the practices, also protection of human health or safety. There are many other objectives that have been identified. And then in the description, we have this note: this draft Uganda standard was also notified to the TBT committee. And this is a recent notification from January. So the SPS was 1 day later notified, the TBT on 22 January and the SPS on 23 January. And the last one, Canada. Also, this was from November 2023. At the same time here, the two notifications on food additives and compositional standards for some food products in general. And again, in the description, you can see a text in red. These regulations were also notified under GSPSN, under the SPS committee, and that's a symbol of notification. So this is, I am referring here, the text you will find in the TBT notification, and in the SPS you will find under the TBT, right? So that's how you can identify this notification submitted under both committees. And then with this, I stop here, and then we can address the questions. So on the last question from Comesa, the 14%, so just to recall, the 14%, to be clear, it's about 23 members that we count that have activated the forum, the national forum. Okay. So yes, it's relatively low, and that's something that we are observing, that members seem not to be using that extensively the communication reach out functions that were presented earlier by Nazia. And so yes, we are trying to to create more awareness, to get members use more the national forum, to activate the national forum. But in terms of using the platform for other functions, it's very high. For example, almost all notifications are submitted through the platform. We have a large number of registered users, over 20,000 registered users. So yes, there are still some functions that need to be reinforced, strengthened. Now, what? When a notification, yes, it can happen that a notification submitted to the SPS, and so it goes first to us. So actually, Marion de Leon will have a look at it. Our notification responsible colleague. And if there is any issue, and we'll have a quick look at it, and we say, oh, maybe this is not SPS. So of course, we will contact the notifying member. And that's also important to follow, the notification. You can provide the contact of the person that is submitting the notification, so we can enter into a discussion just to confirm whether if we think that to clarify it. And in case of that, and we can also suggest to contact our TBT colleagues if it was a TBT, and the same for TBT. So we have a very strong communication here to make sure that if we have any doubt, to make sure they're notified under the right. And if it should be also notified to another committee, in addition to SPS, to TBT, that's something also we can suggest to the notifying member. But we won't be, it won't be circulating it and then correcting it, right? That will be before circulation. And then Morocco, le Maroc, j'ai pas sûr d'avoir très bien compris.
I'm not sure I fully understood your question. When you notify under both, sometimes the first time you notify it, it could be the TBT, and then it could fall into that's the one you have to look at for the comment section. I didn't get your question fully, Morocco. Yes, I'm talking about the comment period. Usually it's under the TBT. And then sometimes you can have a week for the SPS comment period. And then at other times, we always refer to the TBT comment period. So which one do we go by? The TBT?
Yeah, we can, perhaps that's something we can discuss bilaterally and see those notifications and discuss them. I think with this, I think we can stop. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I noticed that we may be running a little bit out of time. So if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to contact the Secretariat for any follow-up. Now I'll give the floor to Ms. Serra Aireal from the TBT section in the WTO Secretariat. Ms. Aireal will be presenting on transparency-related work in the TBT committee. Afterwards, I will give the floor to Mr. George Opillo, and at the end of those two presentations, I will open the floor for any Q&A if we still have time. So Ms. Arial, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. I'm very pleased to join this SPS Transparency Workshop and to be able to provide you with an update on ongoing work in the TBT Committee on Transparency. And the presentation I will be making actually builds on a presentation I had already made 2 years ago in the previous transparency workshop held, I think, in July 2022. Now, Or since my colleagues have already gone over this, I'll go relatively quickly over some of the basic slides on the provisions and move on to some more recent updates. Just first of all, to say that as my colleagues have indicated, the key TBT transparency provisions are very similar to those found under the SPS agreement. The core four we usually highlight are the notification of the case of TBT draft technical regulations and conformity assessment procedures for the comment period, except in urgent situations, publication of regulations, establishment of an inquiry point, and designation of a notification authority. So these you are already quite familiar with. And there are three additional requirements actually on the TBT side, which you do not find under the SPS agreement. One is a one-off statement of implementation, where members are to indicate how they will implement the TBT agreement. And I will get back to this one in a moment because there was some recent activity on this in the committee. Another one is agreements between members. This is under Article 10.7. This is whenever a group of members bilaterally, for example, reach agreement regarding technical regulations, conformity assessment procedures, or standards, they are to notify these under a specific notification format. This is not exactly the same, but similar to the equivalence notifications that are foreseen under SPS. And I have to say, we have not seen that many notifications coming through under this article. Oftentimes, they will refer to things like mutual recognition agreements, for example. Then there are a number of transparency-related obligations for standards. And Rolando already mentioned in his presentation that there's a distinction between technical regulations and standards under the TBT agreement, where technical regulations are mandatory and standards are voluntary. But nevertheless, these voluntary standards are also governed through, especially in the Annex 3 of the TBT agreement. And I won't go into the details, but some of these, this information to be provided, for example, accepting the code of good practice for the preparation and adoption of standards and sharing of work programs is done actually through the ISO. And since standards are often then referenced in technical regulations, it is also of key importance. The transparency is of key importance also in the development of standards, even if they are voluntary, at least to start with. Now, again, similar to SPS, transparency practices have evolved over time since 1995. For example, it's through committee decisions that we have a 60-day comment period, like in SPS. Notification formats have been developed and they have been revised over time. Now there's hyperlinks, for example, to texts notified in notifications. There's an effort to share translations, initially through supplements, now through e-ping. Of course, over time, a number of digital tools have been developed, most recently e-ping, to help with implementation. And a very important document on the SPS side is GSPS 7, and I think it's revision 5 now. Now on the TBT side, we do not have a mirror document. For some reason, historically, all decisions and recommendations of the committee on all topics are compiled in one document, and that is GTBT 1 revision 15 at the moment. But its section 6 relates to transparency. So if you want to sort of check sort of the evolution of recommendations on transparency, that's where you have to go. We are trying to now extract some of the transparency information in a more digestible form, because this document is now, I think, around 100 pages. So it's not very easy to navigate, and also has some recommendations which have been overtaken by others. Just some quick facts and figures. Rolando showed you on the SPS side the rise in number of notifications, and similarly also on the TBT side, we're observing an increase in the number of notifications. And I will share with you some figures from our most recent annual review, which was just issued about 10 days ago. So we saw the circulation of 4,068 TBT notifications last year. And this is more than SPS, but of course, keeping in mind that TBT covers all products and sectors, so its coverage is broader. And some issues I'd like to highlight is that, in fact, last year we had 99.8% of notifications submitted via ePink. And hopefully we'll reach 100 this year. And we've seen notifications from 90 members. It's also an increase compared to recent years. And also of note is that 83% of these notifications come from developing countries and LDCs, with a couple of leaders I will get to in a moment. And in terms of the comment period provided, we've seen that last year, on average, the period provided was 58.5 days. Another important issue for being able to track notifications, filter them, get proper alerts on them is, of course, precision of information on products covered. Now, this is one area where there's a bit of difference in SPS and TBT. In the TBT area, 51% of TBT notifications last year actually included HS codes. I think this is a higher figure in SPS. However, on the TBT side, the codes that are used are ICS codes, which are usually related to development of standards. There, the figure is higher. So as you will see further down, this is sort of an issue that how can we improve clarity on products covered? How can we improve its precision? Then you'll get better search, better understand impact, better alerts, assess the volume or value of trade that might be affected, and so on and so forth. Now, just to highlight, go back to this information I had that members, I would like to say that it's members of the East African community that are in top 10 notifiers for last year. And this, so here you see US is number 1, but then we have 5 members of EAC, which are actually often notifying jointly, leading notifications. And I think it's worth a case study, but I think somebody sitting at the podium with us is one of the reasons for the dynamism in the region, of course, joined by a lot of other dynamic and committed colleagues, but I think it's really something to be celebrated and something to learn from. And another issue I wanted to mention is that we have seen quite an increase in addenda. And last year we saw more than 1,600 of these. In fact, until 2020, there was no structure for addenda. It was just a free text form. But another issue that was raised often was the importance of knowing when a notified draft measure actually enters into force and what it says. Because of course, the original draft may have changed. And the obligation in the agreement is to notify the draft. But what happened afterwards is a bit, can remain a bit uncertain or unclear. That's why there was a, in the 8th trial review in 2018, a recommendation for members to routinely notify adoption, entry into force, and with dates and texts through addenda. And so we see some movement there. And here you see that sort of the ones notified last year, submitted last year, 78% provided information on adoption, publication, and entry into force. And transparency remains a key topic in trial reviews. The 8th trial review concluded in 2018. There were 16 transparency-related recommendations. In the 9th trial review, there were 19. and I will go a bit into detail on some of these in a moment. And we also, similar to SPS, there is currently ongoing the 10th trial review of the TBT agreement, which will hopefully be concluded by the end of this year. And we do have in the document I reference here an overview of proposals, and there are already a good number of transparency related ones as well, relating to issues such as updating the inquiry point guide, introducing further enhancements to EPING, improving access to translations, and being able to better track what happens to comments submitted. Now, as I mentioned, there were 19 recommendations at the last trial review, and that's why the committee agreed to set up a transparency working group to advance with these recommendations. It was established in March 2022. It's open to all members. It has had 8 meetings so far, and the working group reports back to the committee. And if the working group reaches agreement on a new guideline or recommendation to be pursued further, it's proposed for adoption then to the TBT committee. And there's a dedicated web page now where you can find all materials related to the working and state of play of the 19 recommendations. And I'll share with you some of the follow-up actions on the recommendations since 2022. Just to recall, the 9th trial review finished end of 2021. So since the beginning of 2022, it's the implementation of these recommendations. One of them was to have a streamlined and centralized platform. And in response, already the Secretariat had been exploring options to streamline its tools. And this recommendation validated that effort, and the platform was launched. Then another recommendation was the use of the EPING's International Forum for announcing when a member has submitted comments or replies. A similar one was using EPING's International Forum for sharing unofficial translations. These were 2 specific recommendations. And since 2022, we've seen more than 300 posts on EPING related to TBT notifications, often announcing comments have been submitted or sometimes sharing unofficial translation. Then a couple of other actions have attempted to address other recommendations. For example, there was a July 2022, thematic session, which provided an opportunity for members to share information on how they provide product information notifications and how they use or don't use HS code. As I had mentioned, this is quite a challenge. And another was domestic coordination and good practices in domestic coordination, another recommendation. Then at the June 2023 special meeting on transparency, there was quite an emphasis on EPING, as you're doing here now. Then a specific emphasis was on how to prepare and respond to comments and members sharing their experience. And this is contributing towards a good practice guide that I will get to in a moment. And there was also a Secretariat-led workshop this time on HS codes, on getting a better grasp of how they work. Then a couple of other actions. It was highlighted that as the original regulation draft notified to the WTO might be in any language, sometimes it's hard to understand the context or be able to provide timely comments. So as a solution, apart from possibly sharing unofficial translations or using computer-assisted software, was to call on members to provide more details in description of content and provide more links to relevant documents, further clarify timelines. So actually the guidelines for notifications, the regular notifications have been adopted, revised. Another one was, I had mentioned that there's a one-off obligation for members to submit their statement of implementation. This is often about the overarching framework and institutional arrangements towards implementing the agreement. And it's usually a one-off, but members are also to provide updates as things evolve. And there was no format for this. It was free text. and the information was not necessarily always consistent across the notifications. So one of the recommendations was to develop a template for this. So just last week, following a series of meetings in the working group where this issue has been discussed and certain drafts have been shared, now there is a new template in EPING for these notifications, where, for example, members can identify under implementing actions any underlying laws and regulations they issue, or where they publish a notice, another obligation in the agreement, how much they give for comments, and where they publish final text. There's ongoing work in the transparency working group looking forward. One is continued review of notification formats in light of some specific recommendations. And one thing that could be of interest to this group is the development of a good practice guide on how to comment on a notification. Last year, a group of 7 inquiry points came forward to collaborating on a draft based on some input from that July 2022 workshop. Then comments were received from members on a first draft. And one important issue is to maybe have, in fact, 2 products. One is for inquiry points, another for stakeholders more generally. And if you're interested, I have included here a reference to the latest version of the draft, not finalized yet. But as you can see, it has sections that could be of interest to this committee as well: institutional arrangements, sending comments, responding to comments, and some analysis of case studies. And I'm reaching the end. A few points on technical assistance and transparency and EPING are topics most requested under TBT. And similar to SPS colleagues, we also ran an TBT Transparency Champions program with very good results. And in fact, some of the colleagues from this program are working on the good practice guide. So that was a very good turnout, actually. We have Kenya, Namibia, South Africa working on the good practice guide. And finally, a last word, that there was also strong emphasis on transparency in the MC13 declaration on TBT. I don't know if you have noticed in the news, sometimes it's hard to find this, but there was a ministerial declaration on strengthening regulatory cooperation to reduce technical barriers to trade. And among others, it emphasized the importance of comments, refinement of digital tools, importance of notifying adapted texts, promoting further development of EPING and e-agenda, and importance of technical assistance and capacity building. But just to say that the declaration is now sort of a guiding document for the committee, and where I suspect some of these will be put into action. And I've just included some reference documents for those of you interested, hopefully with links, correct links. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. We will follow up on the questions at the end. And I have to say, I do love the concept of transparency champions. This is a great thing. And I do hope that our colleagues from Capitals follow up on this, both on the activity and SPS side. Now, I will give the floor to the last presenter for today, Mr. George Opillo, who is head of the TBT National Inquiry Point in Uganda's National Bureau of Standards. Mr. Opillo will be presenting Uganda's experience in the identification and notification of national and regional measures that contain both SPS and TBT provisions to the SPS and TBT committees. Mr. Opillo, I will let you settle down, but please, as soon as you are comfortable, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now comfortable, so I will begin the presentation. I'm from the TBT Inquiry Point of Uganda, and it is hosted by the Uganda National Bureau of Standards. So as you can see from the title of the presentation, and also if I'm to talk a little bit about what Rolando said, that an SPS measure cannot be a TBT measure, but in practice we have seen in our case that there are quite a number of measures that contain both SPS and TBT provisions. I don't know why the people behind these measures actually do that, but I think one of the reasons could be because they want to bring all requirements in one document so that it is easier for people who are being regulated and also other members who import into our country to find all the requirements in one document and can facilitate them to comply with the requirements. I will a little bit give some background in terms of introduction, and then I will explain who is involved in measures that we notify to the SPS and TBT committees. I will also explain who is involved in the notification of TBT measures. I will also touch on the roles that the TBT inquiry point play in notification of TBT and SPS measures, or the SPS and TBT committee. And then I will end with some statistics, just like we have seen a number of them in the previous presentations. So by way of introduction, I note that my country frequently adopts national TBT measures that contain both SPS and TBT provisions. And also at regional level, Uganda is an active participant in harmonization of East African Community, EAC for that matter, TBT measures. And we have also seen that a number of these measures contain both SPS and TBT provisions. And we are also beginning to actively participate in harmonization of TBT measures. This is being done under the auspices of the African Organization for Standardization, ASO, because our heads of states and government, when they were negotiating the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, they said that the basis for trade under the AfCFTA trade arrangement will be on the basis of measures that are developed by ASO. And we have also seen that some of these measures contain both SPS and TBT provisions, and the notification that Rolando showed as an example is actually a continental notifications that we notify both to the SPS and TBT committees. So many of these measures actually meet the criteria for notification to both the SPS and TBT committees. So who is involved? I think I touched a little bit on this. We have to involve in identifying the measures that need to that meet the criteria for notification to the SPS and TBT committees. Earlier, when I said we have government officials who participate in drafting national TBT measures, that is only for Uganda. Regional East African OEAC TBT measures, continental measures under the AfCFTA. And they are the one who recommend, I alluded to this, recommend notification of the draft measures to both the SPS and TBT committee. And then we also have the TBT National Inquiry point coming at the stage of the notification of the measures, and I will give the details of what the roles the inquiry point play. So who is involved in the notification of TBT measures? We have government officials who participate in drafting national, regional, and continental TBT measures. At the moment, the way we are implementing notification function, the EPING, TBT, and SPS, SPS and TBT platform, is that we have trained 32 government officials so far. I think we are going to train more to draft TBT measures. And actually, some of them draft both TBT and SPS notifications. So every government official who is involved in drafting national TBT or EAC TBT measures actually draft the notification. And so we have registered them on the EPING SPS and TBT platform, and we have granted them the notification drafting rights. They only draft, they don't submit. I think it is now clear from the previous presentation made by Ronaldo and Nazia that you have two categories of rights. You can either draft and you don't submit, but you can also draft and submit. So these drafters of notifications who are also drafting national and regional measures, they've been granted the drafting rights. And once the measures they're drafting has progressed to the stage of public consultation at national level or at EAC level, then they also proceed to draft the notifications so that when we are subjecting these draft measures for consultation, either in Uganda, if it is a national measure, or in EAC, then that is when they also initiate the notification to WTO by drafting the notifications. So they draft the notification up to the stage of completing the notification. So they draft and complete the notifications, meaning that now the notification is ready to be reviewed and submitted to the WTO Secretariat. And once the drafter of the notifications have completed the notifications, then at the level of the TBT inquiry point, we receive an automated email alert generated by the EPING, SPS, and TBT platform, indicating that there's a draft notification on our dashboard at the level of the inquiry point. Now, this is one of the functionalities we advocated for. If I recall well, it was a subject of our triennial review proposal under the old system, the TBT notification submission system. And at that time, our argument indicating this kind of alert was that under the old system, we had the account for drafting, then account for submission. So when our drafter would draft and complete the notification, if we don't frequently lock in with the account that had the right to submit, then the notification could be sitting there. So we said it would be better for the system to send an alert, an auto alert, officials who have the rights to submit notifications, so that once there's a notification that is completed in the system, then that alert comes, and it would avoid the delays between the drafting and completion and submission of the notification. And we are grateful to the Secretariat only including these features in the EPING, SPS, and TBT platform. So once we get this alert, I'm one of those people who get the alerts in my mailbox, then we now know that there is a completed notification that we need to act on and move the process further to submission to WTO Secretariat. And also, the subject of the email, the automated email alert, indicates the title of the notifications, the kind of the title of the draft measure that is being notified. And then at the level of the inquiry point, the officials at that stage then will cross-check for fulfillment of the criteria for notification under both the SPS and TBT agreements, meaning that at this stage we are interested in seeing whether this draft measure that is being notified to the two committees actually contain both TBT and SPS provisions. And on the SPS side, we are more interested in seeing whether there's a food safety provisions in the draft, either provision that concern maximum residual limits, maybe setting the maximum limits for contaminants and hygiene. So when we see that, then we know there's a composition requirements in the draft, but there's also some SPS provision in the draft, and therefore the drafter could have made the right decision to draft both SPS and TBT notification. But also, as I mentioned earlier, when I was making comments on the Secretariat's presentation, this is decided among the group of people who are working on the draft measures, that this measure meets the criteria for notification under both the SPS and TBT agreements. And then we will, at the inquiry point, we review the completed notification to ensure that the notification formats are correctly filled in terms of the completeness, that all the sections of the notification has been filled out. We also look at the HS codes that has been proposed by the drafter of the notifications, and also the ICS codes that are selected, whether they're applicable to the type of measure that is being notified. Now, a little bit of comments. It was mentioned by the secretary that there is a more use of the ICS codes in TBT notifications compared to HS codes. And I think this mainly relates to the fact that one, the people who are involved in drafting notifications, they have limited knowledge on how to use the HS codes. And I think this has been discussed in the TBT committee several times, leading to some recommendation that Sarah shared in our presentation. And on the high use of the ICS codes, which is the International Classification for Standard Codes, I think this is mainly because most of the national inquiry points under the TBT agreement are hosted by the national standard bodies, and they are more familiar. The people who are working the inquiry point are more familiar with the use of the International Classification for Standards, or ICS codes. So that's why I think most notifications have got ICS code compared to HS codes. We, at the inquiry point, will also be interested in seeing that the correct articles under which the TBT notification is being submitted is specified in the drafted notifications, and also the correct objectives under the SPS agreement. We also check if there is a relevant international standard. Is there a relevant international standards? In most of the time, the draft of the notifications are not very keen on this. So we check, we go to the Codex website, which is there are links to the services in the SPS notification format. So we go there and actually check, is there a relevant Codex standard? Is there a relevant recommendation from OWA? Is there a relevant IPPC standard? But that, where we check for relevant international standard depends on the title of the measure that is being notified. If it is linked to Codex standards, then we go direct to the Codex standard. If it is on IPC, related more to IPC, then we go to the IPPC website to check. We also indicate that the draft is being notified to both the SPS and TBT committee in either of the notification. And I think this came out clearly in the example notification that Ronaldo displayed on the screen. So we indicate for the TBT notification, we indicate this against the title of the draft measure that is being notified. And for the SPS, we indicated among the description of contents. I had a little bit of discussion in the past based on the last recommendation where they were saying this should be indicated in the relevant document sections in the SPS notification format. And I thought that is what is being used. Then I was corrected by the secretariat here that members are actually indicating this information in the description of contents section of the SPS notification format. Then, if all is well, we submit this notification to the secretariat to process and circulate to the WTO members. So in terms of the statistics on notification that we have submitted to both the SPS and TBT committees from 1995 up to today, what I can say is that majority of the SPS notification that we have notified members are those that contain both SPS and TBT provisions. And in total, as of today, there are 432 measures. The breakdown out of the 432, 287 of the notification are national notification of Ugandan TBT measures that contain SPS provisions. 94 of them are joint EAC regional notification. We expect this to grow because we only established the EAC joint notification mechanism in September 2021. for many reasons. One of the reasons is that we were a subject of a trade concern that ran in the TBT committee from 2016 to 2018. And one of the issues was some ESC members had not notified the measures that were the subject of the trade concern. So we expect this to grow because we are going to ensure that future trade concern that may be raised against TBT measures in the TBT committee, the aspect of non-compliance or notification obligations should not be raised in the committee again. And as of now, from September 2021, we are 100% compliant. I can talk with confidence because I am involved in coordinating this activity to our notification obligation with respect to ESC TBT measures. And then 51% are now continental measures that are being developed under the auspices of the African Organization for Standardizations that they are going to be used for the trade under the AFCFTA trade arrangement. So that is it for today. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Opillo. Actually, I was going to congratulate you and give you a round of applause, but I think the room has this. So thank you very much for this presentation. And once again, my congratulations on all the hard work achieved by Uganda in the last few years, coordinated by you, and of course, enhanced by all the work with the different authorities. So thank you very much for this presentation. Now with this, let me now open the floor for any questions or comments related to the presentation, both by Sierra and Mr. Opillo. The floor is open. We still have a few minutes, so let's give it a chance to a couple of questions if there are any. San Lucia, you have the floors.
Okay, good afternoon. Hannah Romain from St. Lucia. I'm just curious. You mentioned that you conduct training on how to draft TBT and SPS measures. Is there a draft good practice guideline, or what are your materials used to conduct the training that you're carrying? Thanks.
UNCTAD, and then I would think we will, and COMESA, and with that we end the round of questions. UNCTAD and COMESA. UNCTAD.
Thank you very much. I also have a question to the last presentation. I would like to hear about how you coordinate with other EAC or AFCFTA members. If you make a joint measure, another member state might modify the same measure to the WTO. So I wonder, like, I'm going to notify this to the WTO, so other countries don't need to do it. Like that kind of coordination. I wonder how it is getting made. Thank you.
Last question, COMESA. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine is just to understand on the data that has been collected now regarding specific trade concerns versus the level of notification. Is there any association in the data between these two sets of data? The trade concerns raised and also the level of notification of those countries where those trade concerns have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's first go with the two questions directed to Mr. Opillo, and then I don't know if Sarah would like to address the one from COMESA. Mr. Opillo, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, St. Lucia, for the first question regarding training on how to draft SPS measures and TBT measures. So I want to look at or to explain this at two levels. There's no manual, as far as I'm aware, but Sarah will probably maybe also touch on this. that has been developed by the TBT committee, or maybe also this committee. The chair is here, can correct me, for doing training for drafters. So when we are doing training at a national level, what I will say, these are vertical training. It is not like the type of training that is done here, where you have maybe about 20-something countries attending. So mainly you concentrate on horizontal issues in the agreements, SPS and. So at home, when I am doing a training, I look at what is the Ugandan regulatory system? What is the SPS and TBT agreement saying? And what are the recommendations on transparency these two committees have made, SPS and TBT committees? Then I contextualize the training to the Ugandan context, so that is more relevant, so that the people I'm training are able to appreciate how they should, for example, fill the notification formats. But that will be based on our regulatory system, from the drafting of the measures up to the time when we sunset or we repeal the measures. So that is at national level. At the regional level, in the context of EAC, specifically in relation to a TBT joint notification mechanism, what happened is that there are also EAC law that I looked at, and then I look at some policy documents that details how such measures are supposed to be developed and who are responsible for the development of the measures will now be the subject of the training. Then I contextualize again the training to the EAC context. It will be a little bit different from the Ugandan context, but if you have benefited from the Ugandan training, then you can easily understand how we are the training that, and appreciate the training that would be done at the EAC level. So again, that would be a vertical, but looking at the EAC relevant regulatory framework, as well as policy document that give details on how TBT measures should be developed at EAC level. And then on the other question on the coordinations of by UNTACT at EAC and at Continental, at the moment, there is no Continental joint notification mechanism. There could be ideas how it can be done, and I want to excite the officials that are here from EU, from the AU, the African Union, and the AFCFTA Secretariat, maybe to look into that. So the issue of duplication is horizontal. In EAC, we have 5 members that are WTO members. So if each of them is supposed to notify the same measure, then there would be 5 duplicate notifications. And this applies to all regional economic community members that are doing joint notification in the SPS and TBT committee. So for us, again, how do we do the coordination? The coordinations is based on the policy documents or instruments that have been adopted at the EAC level. It gives guidelines on who should participate, how the documents should be developed. It also requires EAC members to choose the sector in which they want to host the secretariat for developing these measures. So then we tag the coordination at the secretariats and make sure that we identify all the officials who are responsible for managing the development of these measures in the various secretariats that are scattered in EAC partner states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pillo. Very quickly, Sarah, if you can address the question from COMESA so that we can wrap up.
Yes, thank you for the good question. In fact, in the case of TBT, a big share of STCs raised in the committee relate back to notifications. And if you go back all the way back, 68% of all STCs make reference to notification. And last year, this was 71%. And in fact, also to recall that some of the STCs raised are in fact raised because there was no notification. So that also exists. But I have to say, with your question, we could dig deeper into this for more statistics. But maybe lastly to say, in your EPIN clinic tomorrow, I think you could show how you can find notifications on which STCs have been raised.
Thank you. Just to say that on the SPS side, this connection is less evident. We have just a few notifications that can be related to an STC. And that's something that is also highlighted. I mean, there is a specific paragraph on our annual report on transparency, the Gen 804, that would be paragraph 3.20, if interested.
Thank you, Rolando. Now, I see Yek, but I have to say that we will continue with this workshop tomorrow. So it's okay. This conversation will continue. I'm very much aware of the time and on the fact that our interpreters are already giving us a little bit of a few minutes extra so that we can wrap it up. But my suggestion will be for us to continue this conversation tomorrow so we can touch base, Mr. Pillonek, in case you want to have another go at this exchange, because it's really a rich conversation. But please bear in mind once again that we need to wrap up. So I will need to bring session 2 to a close for today. And once again, I extend my gratitude to the speakers for their presentations. As the 6th review of the SPS agreement is ongoing, it could perhaps be interesting for members to further reflect on this topic. That said, we will continue with the workshop tomorrow. The first session will commence promptly at 10 a.m. in the same room with presentations by the 3 international standard setting bodies. So that's Codex, WOA, and IPPC. This will be followed by an EPIN clinic from 11:30 to 1 p.m. The EPIN clinic is a training activity for SPS, NNAs, and NEPs and other interested delegates. It will be held in this room in person only. Remember that delegates who are not interested in attending the EPIN clinic will be welcome to join us back in room W and via Zoom for the afternoon session of the workshop from 3 to 6 p.m., where several members will share their experiences with us. So with that said, I wish you a nice evening and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you very much.